Welcome, dear brave soul. You're tuning into Horror Podcast, and I'm truly grateful you're here. Whether you're a long-time listener or just stumbled upon this channel, thank you for joining me for another scary tale. If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and means more than you know. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from, what brought you here, or even what kind of story you'd like to hear next. Your support keeps this channel going, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Now, let's get into today's horror story. This happened almost 10 years ago, and I still think about it whenever I walk into a coffee shop and some guy gives me a compliment I didn't ask for. My name's Nicole, and I was 19 when it happened. I just graduated high school the year before and picked up a job at a local coffee chain in a strip mall on the edge of Tempe, Arizona. It was one of those franchise places with teal walls, wooden benches, and a constant whir of an espresso machine. I worked opening shifts mostly 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., which meant the crowd was usually groggy commuters, students, and retired regulars with nothing else to do. I wasn't looking for anything. I had just gotten out of a long-term high school relationship, the kind you cling to more out of comfort than connection. I'd been hurt, but mostly I was just tired. I wanted space to figure myself out, focus on saving for community college, and maybe get through a shift without someone calling me sweetheart. When you're a young woman working behind a counter, you get used to a certain type of attention. Guys would try too hard to make me laugh or lean across the bar to tell me I had a nice smile. Some would leave their number on a receipt. Others would just linger too long after getting their drink. I learned to manage it, smile politely, move quickly, avoid eye contact when it felt too heavy. But then Evan started coming in. The first time he ordered a vanilla cold brew, he smiled like he already knew me. He asked about the beans we used and what I recommended. And while I was pouring milk into the shaker, he casually asked if I wanted to grab a drink sometime. I said no. He didn't flinch. Fair enough, he said, like it was a game, and I made the first move. I figured that would be the end of it. But 20 minutes later, there he was again, back in line, same order, same smile. Guess I really like cold brew, he joked. Or maybe I just wanted another shot at convincing you. It was weird, but I laughed anyway. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I was lonely. He seemed harmless enough. A little nerdy, clean-cut, wireframe glasses, and a faded Joy Division shirt. He looked like the kind of guy who spent weekends at the local record store and knew how to fix his own bike chain. A little awkward, but respectful. Or so I thought. So I gave him my number. We started texting that night. The conversation was light. Music, food, some sarcastic banter. He told me he worked part-time at a game shop a few blocks down and had a cat named Bowie. I told him I was saving up for classes at Mesa Community College. He said he liked girls who had ambition. It felt casual, easy. We made plans to hang out the next evening after my shift. He said he wanted to cook dinner for me. I hesitated, but he insisted it was his thing, that he made a killer red sauce and loved cooking for people. Looking back, I should have insisted we meet somewhere public, but it was still early in the day, and I figured I'd trust my gut. His place was a duplex near Apache Boulevard. The outside was plain but clean, a scruffy lawn with a crooked solar light, a welcome mat with the W, half worn off. He greeted me at the door with a tiny bouquet of flowers, grocery store carnations, and thanked me for coming. I smiled. The effort was nice. But once I stepped inside, the vibe shifted. The living room was cluttered. There were old pizza boxes on a coffee table, a stack of game controllers, and a weird smell I couldn't quite place, like a mix of incense and cat litter. No decorations, just blank beige walls and a dusty floor lamp in the corner. Music was playing low, something moody and indie. And at the small dining table, there was a guy already sitting there with a beer in hand. "This is Matt," Evan said, "my roommate." Matt looked up and smiled. "Hey." I smiled back, more out of politeness than anything. Evan dished up pasta while the three of us sat in the kitchen, talking over plates of spaghetti that were, surprisingly, decent. Evan did most of the talking. He told me about his time in community college, his job, his favorite band, how he once drove to California on a whim just to see a band live. It was like he was trying to perform the part of interesting guy rather than just be himself. At some point, Matt and I started chatting about books. Turned out we'd both read the same graphic novel in high school, and we were laughing over one of the characters when Evan's voice cut through. "Matt, maybe you should go drink your beer in your room." The room went quiet. Matt looked confused. "What? You're obviously more into Nicole than I am." Evan snapped. "Why don't you just ask her out already?" I froze mid-bite. Matt blinked, visibly thrown off. "Jesus, dude. Chill. We're just talking." Evan stood up and left the room without another word. Matt leaned toward me and said quietly, "He does this sometimes. Don't take it personally." I just nodded, trying not to look too alarmed. But inside, I was already planning my exit. When Evan came back in, he acted like nothing happened. Offered me more wine. Suggested we watch something. But I wasn't comfortable anymore. My stomach was in knots. Matt eventually stood up and said he had to grab something from his car. When Evan stepped into the kitchen to grab snacks, I turned to Matt and whispered, "Please don't leave me alone with him." He hesitated, visibly conflicted, then gave me a small nod. "Back in 5, he said, but he didn't come back." Evan popped a movie on, something stupid and loud, and sat way too close on the couch. His arm brushed mine, then stayed there. I shifted, told him I needed to get going soon, that my little brother might need a ride from a friend's house. "You didn't mention that earlier," he said. "I didn't know," I replied. He stared at me like he was trying to read between the lines. Then he smiled. "Guess that just means you owe me a second date." That's when my phone rang. It was Lucas, my 17-year-old brother, asking if I could come pick him up. I told him yes. I was already on my way. Evan stood up. "I'll come." I told him that wasn't necessary. "I insist," he said. "Come on, it'll be fun." There was no good way to say no without making it worse. So I said okay. We drove in silence. When we arrived at the house, he got out and wandered off toward the backyard, uninvited. I sat in the car, texting Lucas to hurry. He came out a minute later, looking confused. "Who's that guy?" I said I'd explain later. We dropped Evan off at his place. But before getting out of the car, he turned to Lucas and said, "Nice bumping into you, man." Lucas looked at him. "What? You kinda ruined our night," Evan said flatly. "Bump into me again and I'll break your fucking arm." I felt the air leave my lungs. Evan got out and slammed the door. We drove off in stunned silence. Back home, Lucas looked at me across the kitchen table and said, "He's messed up. Please tell me you're not seeing him again." I said no. Of course not. The next morning, I woke up to a text. Not a good sign when the flowers are still on the table. Sad face. I stared at it for a while before responding. Not a good sign when you threaten my brother. He texted back saying he was joking. That Lucas took it the wrong way. That I was being dramatic. I told him Lucas thought he was a piece of shit. I said I trusted my brother's judgment more than a guy I'd known for 2 days. I told him not to contact me again. He didn't reply. I blocked his number, and that was it. For a few days after, I felt shaken. Not terrified, but unsettled in that way, where your brain keeps replaying what could have gone worse. I had been alone with him. I had let him charm me. I had ignored red flags. What if he hadn't held back? What if he hadn't let me leave? I didn't go back to that coffee shop job much longer after that. Took a second job at a bookstore instead. Safer crowd. Looking back, I realized just how close I came to something bad. How casually we step into strangers' lives without knowing what they're really capable of. How much we rely on gut instinct and hope it's not wrong. I've never dated anyone I met on a job since, and I never will. This happened on a Thursday, just 4 days ago, and I haven't really been able to focus on anything since. Not class, not even sleep. I keep replaying it in my head, trying to make sense of it, wondering how close I really got to something I don't even want to imagine. My name's Alyssa. I'm 20, second year psych major at a state university in Portland. I moved here from Coos Bay last fall, a small town on the Oregon coast that you only really hear about if you grew up near it. Portland's a lot bigger, noisier, and people here don't lock eyes the same way they do back home. I love the city, don't get me wrong, but I still get overwhelmed sometimes, especially meeting new people. I've been on and off dating apps since the start of the semester. Nothing serious, mostly boredom, sometimes loneliness. I matched with this guy named Reed a couple weeks ago. He was 26, said he'd finished his MBA at PSU, and was working part-time at a startup while applying to law schools. I liked that he wasn't a frat guy or some shirtless gym bro. His photos were normal. Jeans, hoodies, one where he was holding a cat. He seemed laid back and smart. Said he liked sci-fi books and cold brew. We chatted about music, podcasts, our mutual hatred of small talk. It felt easy. After about a week, he asked if I wanted to meet for coffee. I suggested Saturday afternoon since my mornings were packed with a club meeting and laundry, but he said he had something going on and asked if I'd be down for Thursday evening instead. There's this place called Brush and Bean that stays open late, he said. They do open mic nights, kind of artsy but chill. That actually sounded perfect to me. Neutral, public, and the kind of place where I wouldn't feel like I was being watched or judged. We agreed to meet at 6:30. I got there a little early and ordered a hazelnut latte while I waited. The place was dim but cozy, with hanging plants, string lights, and mismatched chairs. Definitely the kind of place where everyone pretends not to look at each other, but totally does. Reed arrived about 10 minutes late, wearing a black Carhartt jacket and jeans. He looked like his pictures, which I was grateful for. A little taller than I expected. He smiled as soon as he saw me and said, "Thanks for waiting." I told him it was no problem, and we grabbed a two-top table near the back where it was quieter. The first half hour went fine. He was a little more intense in person, but not in a bad way. He kept good eye contact, asked a lot of questions, and even made me laugh a few times. I liked how he talked about his goals, even if he did ramble a little. He wasn't cocky, just really passionate about whatever he was working on. I found that refreshing. At one point, I got up to use the bathroom, which was down a short hallway near the back of the shop. When I came out, there was a guy, probably late 30s, hoodie, earbuds slung around his neck, leaning against the wall nearby. He stepped forward as I passed and said, quietly, "Sorry to bother you, but I saw the guy you're with drop something into your drink when you went in there." I froze. My first thought was that it was a prank, or that maybe he was mistaken, or worse, trying to mess with me. I blinked at him and said, "What?" He looked serious, not angry, not over-explaining, just calm and steady. "I was sitting behind you too." He waited until you stood up, then leaned over your cup. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't cream or sugar. I thanked him, said I was fine. I didn't want a scene. I didn't want this stranger thinking I needed rescuing. I walked slowly back to the table. Reed was scrolling on his phone. When he saw me, he smiled like nothing happened. "You okay?" he asked. I sat down. "Hey, I know this sounds super weird, but someone just told me they saw you put something in my drink." His expression didn't change right away. Then he laughed, light, confused. "Wait, what? Are you serious?" I nodded. "Yeah, I don't think it's true. I'd feel better if you drank it instead, just to be sure. I hope that's not too weird to ask." He laughed again, like we were in on some awkward joke together. "Wow, okay. No, I get it. That's wild." He picked up the cup, looked at it, then set back down. "Totally get it," he said. "Let me just hit the restroom first." I nodded. "Sure." He stood, smiled again, and walked toward the back hallway. I waited. 10 minutes passed. I checked my phone, scrolled through Instagram, texted my roommate to see if she was home. 15 minutes. I stood up, walked to the hallway. Bathroom door wide open. No one inside. No Reed. I sat back down, staring at the drink. Then at the door. Then at my reflection in the window. After another 20 minutes, I paid for my latte, still untouched, and left. That night, I opened Tinder to look at our messages. Gone. His profile had vanished completely. I hadn't given him my number, thankfully. We'd only messaged through the app, but something about it gnawed at me. The way he left. The way he didn't even try to explain. It didn't feel like someone freaked out by a misunderstanding. It felt like someone caught in the middle of something they didn't want to explain. I still had his name, or what he told me it was. I looked him up. Nothing came up in connection with PSU. No graduation records, no student listings. I called the registrar the next morning just to ask if someone with that name had ever earned a degree from the school. The lady on the phone said she couldn't give me enrollment details, but she could confirm that no one with that name had graduated in the last 10 years. He lied, or he gave me a fake name. Either way, he had every intention of disappearing the second things didn't go his way. I don't know what he was planning. I don't want to know. But I think about that man who waited by the bathroom and what would have happened if he hadn't said anything. I think about how close I came to drinking something I didn't order. How easily I might have brushed it off if no one had spoken up. It's the kind of thing you read about in Reddit threads and safety pamphlets, but you never think it'll be you. You always think you'll sense danger from a mile away, that something will feel off, or that you'll know who to trust. But that night taught me something. Predators don't always look the part. Sometimes they laugh at your jokes, ask about your classes, and tell you how much they admire your ambition. I deleted the app the next day, and I've avoided brush and bean ever since. I keep thinking about how casual it all was, how nothing about him set off alarms until it did. I haven't told many people, partly because I feel stupid, like I should have known better, but I think I just needed to say it somewhere. And if, by chance, the guy who warned me ever sees this, thank you. You probably saved me from something I wasn't ready to face. And to read, or whatever your name really is, let's not meet again. I walked quickly, but not so fast that I looked panicked. The sun was still out, even if it was beginning to dip behind the downtown buildings, and the streets outside the coffee shop still had foot traffic. That helped. Being around people helped. But the hairs on my arms were still standing straight up. I didn't feel safe yet. I had no idea if the man from the restroom had left the shop or was still lurking around somewhere nearby. I hadn't seen him walk out, and I hadn't seen him come in. For all I knew, he could have been sitting in the corner the whole time, watching. I headed straight toward the Trader Joe's across the street. Not because I needed anything, just because I needed somewhere public, bright, and busy to duck into. Somewhere I could blend in, walk the aisles slowly, and regroup. As I pushed through the doors, the cool air and fluorescent lights gave me a strange sense of relief. I grabbed a small red basket just to keep my hands busy and started walking up and down the snack aisle, staring at bags of trail mix like they were the most fascinating thing I'd ever seen. My name's Brenna, by the way. I probably should have mentioned that earlier. I'm 21 now, but this happened last year when I was still living in Seattle, working part-time at a bakery that shared a block with a few other little cafes. On this particular day, I'd finished my shift around 3 p.m. and decided to walk over to a nearby indie coffee shop to study for my night class midterm. The place was cute. Concrete floors, exposed brick walls, Edison bulbs dangling from metal fixtures. Most of the tables were taken by other college kids, hunched over laptops. I ordered a mint tea and found a spot near the back corner, close to the hallway that led to the bathrooms. Everything felt normal at first. I was reviewing flashcards, earbuds in, zoning out to some lo-fi playlist on YouTube. I'd been sitting there for maybe 45 minutes when the tea caught up to me. I stood, stretched, and walked down the narrow hallway to the restrooms. The women's was taken, so I used the gender-neutral single stall next to it, locked the door behind me. I didn't think anything of it until I was washing my hands and heard a strange tap at the door. Not a knock, just this faint scraping, like someone was trying to test the lock. I paused, hand frozen over the sink, and waited to hear if they'd say something. But nothing came, just silence. I turned off the faucet, grabbed a paper towel, and waited a second longer. Another tap. Occupied. I called out, my voice firmer than I felt. The sound stopped. I waited. Maybe they walked away. Maybe it was just someone checking if it was in use. But when I cracked the door and peeked out, I didn't see anyone. The hallway was empty. The women's room door was still closed, and the only thing I could hear was the faint clink of dishes and muffled chatter from the main cafe. I stepped out slowly and looked around. There was no one waiting for the bathroom, no one hovering near the hallway. Still, I had that crawling feeling under my skin like someone had been standing just outside the door listening. I went back to my seat, but I couldn't focus anymore. Something was off. I felt exposed, like I was being watched, even though everyone around me looked busy with their own stuff. After about 10 more minutes of trying to pretend like I was fine, I packed up and left, which brings me back to the aisles of Trader Joe's. I eventually stopped near the frozen section, pulled out my phone, and opened the Notes app. I just needed to write it out. Sometimes putting it into words helped me process. But as I typed, a thought struck me that hadn't before. There were no cameras in that hallway, no staff nearby. If someone had followed me in there, no one would have noticed. If something had happened, I might have been completely alone. My stomach twisted. I set my basket down and walked outside. I still didn't want to go home, but I couldn't stay there either. I crossed the street again and decided to sit at the bus stop, not because I needed a ride, but because it was open, public, and had a good line of sight on the whole block. I sat there watching people go by, every so often scanning the sidewalk and windows. A woman in a red puffer jacket passed by with her toddler. 2 men in Patagonia fleeces walked their dogs. Normal stuff. But then I saw him. Same guy. Same olive green zip-up. Same stiff posture. He wasn't walking toward the bus stop. He was across the street, just outside the coffee shop. At first, I thought maybe he worked nearby. Maybe he just happened to be out there on a smoke break or waiting for someone. But he wasn't moving. He wasn't doing anything. He was just standing, watching. My whole body tensed. I looked down at my phone, trying not to make it obvious that I'd seen him. I typed out a text to my roommate. Hey, weird question. Can you come meet me at the Pike and Yale bus stop? Something feels off. I don't want to walk home alone. She replied in under a minute. Be there in 10. Stay where people can see you. While I waited, I kept glancing up, trying to be subtle, but I swear he was looking right at me now. His arms were folded, his face slack. He didn't even pretend to look away when we made brief eye contact. My heart pounded in my chest like it was trying to break out. I felt pinned in place, like if I stood up, he'd cross the street. Then something shifted. A guy in a delivery uniform stepped out of the corner deli and stood near the curb with a cart of crates. It wasn't much, but just having someone else close by gave me the courage to move. I got up, walked toward the deli, and pretended to check my phone again. I didn't even look across the street. I couldn't. I was too afraid he'd start walking toward me if I made eye contact again. When my roommate showed up, I nearly burst into tears. I didn't want to, but the relief hit me all at once. She looked at me and knew something was seriously wrong. He's over there, I said under my breath. Green zip-up, tall, kind of thinning hair. She looked, then looked back at me. Let's walk. Now. We looped around the block before heading back to our apartment, keeping to busier streets and crossing twice to make sure we weren't being followed. The whole time, I kept glancing behind us, but I didn't see him again. That night, I couldn't sleep. The door to the cafe restroom didn't have a bolt latch, just one of those twist knobs. The hallway was always quiet. The staff usually stayed behind the bar unless they were cleaning. I kept replaying the noise I'd heard at the door. That soft scraping. The too long silence after I called out. The way the hallway had been empty, too empty. What bothered me most wasn't the stare from across the street. It was the idea that this person had calculated that moment in the hallway, waited for me to be alone, maybe followed me from the cafe floor without me even noticing. I didn't report it. I probably should have, but I didn't even have a good description. Just the color of a hoodie and a vague face that was now starting to blur in my memory. Instead, I just stopped going to that cafe. I never walked into a restroom with my earbuds in again. I started checking the locks, listening more closely, Even texting my roommate before heading home, just in case. Little things. Things I still do a year later, because part of me is always waiting for someone to tap on the other side of the door. And the worst part, no one else in that coffee shop noticed anything. To them, it was just another Tuesday afternoon. But to me, it was the first time I realized how thin the line really is between normal and dangerous. Sometimes all it takes is a door without a deadbolt,